The bog is globally unique. It's very, very important worldwide.
There are something like 300 to 500 kilometers of ditches that need to be dammed.
It's like looking at a miniature world when you examine sphagnum down on your hands and knees on a plot.
Hi, I'm Candice Ng, and you're watching The Sustainable Region. Today, we're at the Delta Nature Reserve, which is the only part of Burns Bog currently open to the public. Here, there's almost 3 kilometers of trail and boardwalk to explore. Oh, and don't forget to bring your binoculars, because it's also a great place to spot some interesting birds. There are many reasons why the vast majority of the bog is not accessible to the public. It's being managed as an ecological conservancy area, where the priority is protection, not public use. Another reason is safety. The bog is simply a hazardous place, whereas here in the nature reserve, a network of boardwalks keeps visitors safe and off the surface of the bog. Let's start off today's show with an overview of what's being done to protect and restore the bog, and why. At 3,000 hectares, the Burns Bog Ecological Conservancy area is 8 times the size of Stanley Park. It is hard to judge the bog size from the ground. The protected area borders on the Vancouver landfill, continuing all the way east to the Alex Fraser Bridge.
The bog is globally unique. It's very, very important worldwide, and particularly in the Metro Vancouver region. It's a really important and rare ecosystem. It's actually one of the largest raised bogs on the west coast of the Americas.
In fact, it's the largest undeveloped urban landmass in North America, teeming with red-listed endangered animals and plant life peculiar to the bog landscape. Burns Bog also has high ecological value because it acts as a giant carbon sink, absorbing harmful carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
It's full of this sphagnum moss, and what happens if you take that moss out and let it burn or decompose is that carbon goes up into the atmosphere and contributes to the greenhouse effect. And so if we keep bogs and protect them, then we're keeping that carbon in the ground and combating global warming.
Up until 2004, development threatened, and it was all in danger of being swept away in the name of progress. That all changed when 4 levels of government, the federal government, the province, Metro Vancouver, and the Corporation of Delta, came together to purchase the bog for $73 million, signing a covenant to preserve and restore it for future generations. Some of Burns Bog is still in private hands, but the vast majority, about 87%, is now part of an ecological conservancy area that is co-managed by Metro Vancouver and the Corporation of Delta. Regular operations meetings are evidence of this unique collaboration. Metro Vancouver is in charge of day-to-day operations, including risk management, site security, and safety.
The bog is an unsafe place. The harvest ponds that we see behind me are very deep, and they have very thin mats of vegetation growing over it. If you fell through them, you would have a hard time getting up through the mat again and out of the water, and you could easily drown.
The regional government maintains a regular patrol of the bog from the ground.
I'm just doing a check-in on 80th, going down the spur road.
And also from the air. Delta's fire department is responsible for wildland fire management. The Corporation of Delta is charged with monitoring and improving the bog's hydrology. That's the movement of water into, out of, and within the bog. Some of the research is done in conjunction with Metro Vancouver.
Today we're installing some water level monitoring devices so that we can remotely record how the water fluctuates in this ditch over the year.
What we're trying to do is figure out which direction the water is flowing and how fast it's flowing. We're trying to get a really good idea of how much water is coming in and how much water is going out.
Each and every person working in the bog, whether they're contractors or municipal or regional employees, is required to apply for and receive a permit and undergo a safety orientation. A scientific advisory panel meets about 6 times a year. Made up of several international bog experts, the panel has helped Metro Vancouver and the Corporation of Delta come up with a long-term plan.
Metro Vancouver has a 100-year management plan, and over that period we restore as much of the ecological condition as we can across as much of the bog as we can. And hopefully by the time we're done that first 100 years, we'll be at a point where it's self-sustaining and we can continue to manage it.
City life can be hectic, but it doesn't have to be. An escape is nearby in Metro Vancouver regional parks. Peaceful, relaxing, restorative. With 21 regional parks in Metro Vancouver, there's a place in nature for you. Go to www.metrovancouver.org to find a regional park program near you. Welcome back to the Sustainable Region. Because water is so important in maintaining the bog's ecosystem, building dams to hold water inside the bog is absolutely vital to its restoration. That work is managed by the Corporation of Delta, and with about 6,000 acres of bog, it's a huge job. Don DeMills is a guy who really gets into his work.
Oh, that makes a world of difference when you cool off.
Don is contracted by the Corporation of Delta to build dams in Burns Bog. It's his work site, but its waters also provide respite from this brutally physical work on a scorching hot day.
I actually started building dams in the bog while it was still privately owned. In 1996, there was a massive rectangular canal dug in the very center of the very heart of the bog, and it was really, really damaging it. So we built some quite big dams in there that, really held back the water a lot. Let's use this monster here.
We're really lucky to have Don DeMille in our community. He's very, very passionate and dedicated to trying to preserve the bog.
Decades later, large pieces of industrial equipment sit rusting in the bog. From the air, you can clearly see where large ditches have been dug to facilitate the harvesting of peat, an industry that started here in the 1930s and continued till 1984.
This is unusual for snow in the bog.
Today, the water in Burns Bog is key to its restoration.
So the first one we're going to do is measure down to the water table. So we've got this on. The water is basically the lifeblood of a bog. A raised bog like this has actually managed to bring itself up above the groundwater table, and so it's only fed by precipitation. Rain, fog, snow, things like that.
There are now 225 dams in the bog, all aimed at retaining rainwater. Beaver dams play a role too. They are dotted all over the wetter areas of the bog.
Sarah, I'm going to take you down to where I did a dam 3 or 4 years ago.
But human intervention here, closely supervised by the Corporation of Delta, is absolutely crucial to the restoration of the bog.
It was a place more of mystery and wonder, and now I've tramped the whole thing and I haul equipment in, so it's lost some of its mystique, but it's still wonderful. There's always something neat. I got about 25 or 30 feet from a pair of cranes last week, and always something cool, something different. Eagles flying over most of the time, hawks. Even just in here, a fly lands on your shoulder or your wrist and you have a look at it, and it's usually something really weird that you've never seen before because there's such diversity. There are something like 300 to 500 kilometers of ditches that need to be dammed. I'll have to live to be about 500 years old to get it done myself, so it's just so gigantic.
Daily life can be the same old, but it doesn't have to be.
This wildlife tree behind us?
Discoveries are nearby in the park programs of Metro Vancouver Regional Parks. Informative, inspiring, rewarding. Dozens of park programs are scheduled all year in Metro Vancouver's 21 regional parks. Go to www.metrovancouver.org to find a regional park program near you. Welcome back. If water is the bog's friend, then surely fire is its enemy. Protecting the bog from fires is a key responsibility of the Corporation of Delta Fire Department, and Metro Vancouver staff who may have to act as first responders. In the past, fires have caused devastating damage to the bog, which is why training and information sharing is so important to the co-management of this special place. Members of Metro Vancouver's regional park staff are meeting with firefighters in Delta to discuss a common concern.
Thanks again for inviting us here today and letting us kind of see what kind of training you guys do.
Fire in Burns Bog is a very real threat, having happened many times before. As recently as 2005, as seen in this amateur video. Peat, once used around the world as a heating and cooking fuel, provides the perfect methane-rich environment for a fire to burn underground.
There's two different types of fires that you run into in the bog too. There's so much peat in there, you can get a peat fire in there that burns very deep. And so it'll all of a sudden, it'll burn into the ground and it'll pop up 30, 40 feet away from you. So it's very dangerous that way. But also there's a lot of trees in the bog too. And so then it turns into more of a wildland fire.
So what happens is if we get called on a fire to support, say Delta for instance, we'll bring this trailer along with us. It's geared to help about 6 firefighters.
Metro Vancouver works closely with the Delta Fire Department to make sure that if a fire starts, it is fought with a united approach. Fires in the bog can burn for weeks and have serious ecological consequences.
The 2005 fire that we experienced on the east edge of the bog was very intense, and it actually burned about a meter of the peat, which was a significant portion of the growing section. The pine trees that are here have cones that release their seeds after a fire. And what happened was, after that fire, the seeds were released, and now we have incredibly dense populations of pine trees and birch trees on site, which are hindering the ecological health of the bog.
I have an initial attack kit right here.
Metro Vancouver staff have a truck that carries equipment for first response, including pumps and lengths of hose.
We call it the bog box, and so we have all the different tools and appliances in here.
Delta Fire has 2 small all-terrain vehicles that can get into the often treacherous access trails into the bog. Pumps can be used to get water out of ditches and pits and onto the fire. Water can also be fed into sprinklers to spray onto the ground and keep the fire from spreading. And the fire can be tackled from the air as well. Delta's latest piece of firefighting technology is called the Rage. It has onboard water storage that it can unleash onto a fire without any firefighter ever having to leave the cab of the truck. It's not yet been tested on a bog fire, but Delta firefighters have no doubt that it's just a matter of time. From the air, the damage caused by the 2005 fire is obvious. But losing trees in the bog is not necessarily a bad thing.
One positive aspect of a fire would be the removal of a forest canopy, which is preventing the bog from functioning as it should under normal conditions.
Many members of the Delta Fire crew grew up in the area. For them, a fire in the bog hits close to home.
Well, I've grown up in Delta and grew up right alongside the bog probably well over 45 years of my life. So I've spent lots of time in the bog personally as a kid. It means a lot, for sure.
Metro Vancouver's award-winning video series highlights topics you may not consider when you think about living in our region. Where are the next 1 million people in our region going to live? How do you bore a water tunnel under Grouse Mountain? How is eating fiber linked to generating electricity? Can you use light to disinfect drinking water? Plus, you'll never guess what we found in your garbage. Clean air, safe drinking water, waste reduction, and more. Get behind the scenes for the major projects, cutting-edge science, and innovative solutions that sustain our livable region.
Do you like spending time outdoors? Meeting new friends? Come help others enjoy our amazing park networks by volunteering at one of our Metro Vancouver regional parks. Become a Nature House attendant at Campbell Valley or do habitat restoration at Aldergrove Regional Park. Lend a hand at some fun events. There are many volunteer opportunities that need help from stars like you. Welcome back to the Sustainable Region and our look at Burns Bog. This ecosystem is home to many species of plants and animals, some of which are unique to the bog, and they are part of the reason why protecting the bog is so important. It's a quiet, rainy morning as Thomas Munson and his assistant arrive to do the painstaking work of monitoring vegetation growth in the Burns Bog Ecological Conservancy area.
Since the bog was protected 10 years ago, there was an intention to monitor ecological restoration. And one way of doing that is monitoring vegetation recovery over time. It'll be a challenge to keep all the paperwork dry today. And so we set up 50 permanent vegetation monitoring plots. And the idea is to see how sphagnum moss, which is the key species in the bog, is responding to changing water levels. This is plot B17.
Munson visits each of the vegetation plots once a year,
So the next plot's back this way.
methodically tracking the plant species growing in each plot and measuring the depth of the sphagnum moss.
There's about 13 species of sphagnum in the bog. We deal in my work with about 3, and they're the ones forming the hummocks and then some of the hollow wet areas, and there's some particular to the ditches and the places that have been peat mined. It's like looking at a miniature world when you examine sphagnum down on your hands and knees on a plot, and it's really the unique reason for the bog. Is you can stand on the bog in certain parts and jump up and down and realize that we're on a giant floating island of sphagnum.
Marcus Merkins is a frequent visitor to the bog as part of his duties as a natural resource management specialist with Metro Vancouver Regional Parks.
Right now I'm surrounded by a very common bog species. These are found typically in all the bogs in the Lower Mainland. We have Labrador tea here in front of us, some bog blueberry over here, certainly the sphagnum mats that are underneath me, some reindeer lichen, crusty lichen that sits on top of the sphagnum mats, some bog laurel I see over there.
Sundew is one of the more interesting plants in the bog. It's beautiful and delicate, but it's also a meat eater. These carnivorous beauties begin to show their sticky faces in May. And they're not the only small wonders of the bog.
The diversity of dragonflies and damselflies in the bog is very high, and that's typical for a wetland like this bog here. This particular bog supports breeding sandhill cranes, one of only a couple of breeding areas in the Lower Mainland still. Songbirds are abundant in the bog, likely in the hundreds of bird species.
Dozens of beaver dams are evidence of a healthy population of these industrious creatures. They're rarely seen, but wildlife cameras have captured images of curious deer and healthy-looking coyotes. Because the bog is an unsafe place to be with many hidden hazards, the only people allowed in are those who are part of a small, essential task force that's tasked with restoring and protecting this very special ecosystem.
I just like coming here and listening and smelling and experiencing what we have here. A bog this size is unusual. It's 8 kilometers across and 4 across the other way. It's huge. And when you come into the bog, it's just different than anything else you can experience in the Lower Mainland. You just sort of relax and enjoy what you have around you.
The bog is a wonderful ecosystem. It's very unique. It has species unlike anywhere else. And I've been able to come in for 10 years and look at it. Most people drive by on the surrounding highways and don't even know it exists and don't know how unique it is in terms of its place in BC, its place on the West Coast, and its place in the world. So I've been very lucky.
That's our show for today. We hope you enjoyed learning more about Burns Bog, a very special place that Metro Vancouver and the Corporation of Delta are committed to protecting and restoring. Thanks for watching. You can view, comment on, and share these stories and more at our blog, metrovancouvervideos.org. For the Sustainable Region, I'm Candice Ng. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.